one of the things that a couple of you mentioned was Netflix trying to be HBO, out HBOing HBO and all such as that, which then brings us to Disco, Warner, and HBO. And I would argue that I think since in the last few years, HBO itself hasn't been able to out HBO. But Colin Dixon, what would you do if you ran? You can choose HBO Max specifically, or Warner Media, or take the step up to Disco Warner. And I just saw this morning, David Zaslav said that even though HBO currently has about 68 million subscribers through the traditional HBO and HBO Max, and Disco has about 18 million, Zaslav says we're going to do 200 million. He didn't say when they were going to do 200 million. Colin Dixon, if you were in charge of all of that, what would you do?
Gosh, if I were in charge of all of that, what would I do?
We would all start by saying, oh.
I tell you, HBO Max is a pretty good service now. There's plenty of content in there to make it interesting. I have never been a big HBO fan myself. I've always found the content a little bit too hard. But now HBO Max, there's a lot of content that draws me in there and has me using it. I was a little bit surprised at their approach at ads. They have taken the lowest ad load in the industry. And they've given a fairly substantial, I think it's a $5 price cut. I don't think they're going to make that up with the ad load that they've selected.
Right.
So I think what they need to do is, I hesitate to say increase the ad load, but be smarter with the ad load and take the Paramount Plus approach with, or rather, it's the Peacock, right? It's Peacock that's got 5 minutes and they're doing tremendous ad innovation. Love to see HBO Max do that. Copy that approach. I think that could be extremely helpful to them. I also think that there's some room for them to leverage linear inside of the app. Linear is a great way to just watch more casually, and that could give them more opportunities to increase ad loads without bothering people, because they're merely placing ads in gaps where ads were before. So I think I would probably do that as well. But I have to say, the strategy, let's remember, HBO was the first of the cable premium providers to make the leap to online delivery, and it has done exactly what they wanted it to do, which was to increase get HBO growing again. HBO had been pretty much stuck at about 30 million or 31 million subscribers in the US when they made that change. And there's no question now that all of the growth that they're claiming for HBO and HBO Max are coming from HBO Max. So let's step back a minute. That's a pretty remarkable achievement when they're the most expensive service in the market. So they've got something that people clearly want, clearly value a lot. So, I feel like I'm just diddling at the edges a little bit with the model. But that's what I would do. I would refine the advertising, the way they're going about the advertising, and be a bit more innovative.
Here's, before I'm going to go to Sherry next, but does anybody doubt whether the HBO numbers, when they say X number of HBO cable satellite subscribers and X number of HBO Max subscribers, are they double counting somebody like me, who is an HBO subscriber on DirecTV and an HBO Max user elsewhere? I'm sitting in two buckets.
Yes.
Me twice?
Yes.
Sherry? Yeah.
I think they are. Yeah.
I think they are too. Sorry, guys. I tend to doubt the veracity of some of those numbers.
Well,
Sherry,
the thing is, if they're getting paid on both those units, it's fair enough, right? So
yeah. Sherry, what would you do? You're next.
Fault them. I would not go with the name that they are considering, at least not for anything that a consumer would see. I
What a
think,
silly name. What a silly name.
Yeah.
You mean the Warner
Come
Brothers
on.
Discovery name or, okay.
yeah, I mean, I think they'd be better off with Disco Bros, frankly, because at least it makes everybody laugh, right? And people remember it. But I don't think that would be a great name either. So, and I don't really get the content merger. I don't really get it. I guess
Me
I
neither.
think it makes sense from the standpoint that they need more inexpensive content to mix with their expensive content in order to have maybe a better margin at the end of the day. So maybe I can understand that thinking. Look, they're really smart people running that company, so I'm sure they know why they're doing it. I haven't really read anything that makes a whole lot of sense to me about the consumer proposition, and it really does come down to are they going to get more paying units because they combine these two entities? And I'm not sure how that adds up. 200 million is a nice number. It sounds great. I also looked for the timing component of that number and didn't find it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is going to sound mean, and I don't like this exercise really, Rick, that much, because I think it's so easy to poke holes in other people's strategies, and it is so hard to run a huge company like that. And these are all profitable enterprises, so they're obviously doing something right. They're all enterprises that have lots of consumers interested in them. So I don't mean this in the mean-spirited way that it might sound, but I would stop doing dumb things. Like, I feel like they misstep. Like when they launched HBO Max and the streaming and all that, there was so much customer confusion around that.
Yes.
Right? I'm in the industry and I didn't know what I had. I'm also paying twice for them. And I don't think most consumers feel good about paying twice for the same brand. So I think there are some like slow down and do it right kind of thing. I think the whole debacle with saying they're going to go direct to streaming with all their movies before they told any of the people making their movies about that was really wrongheaded and hurts them in the long run, because Hollywood talent, like it or not, some of those directors and actors, they have a lot of power. And so to blindside somebody who's already got a movie in the can with your studio and tell them they're not going to make their back end because you're not going to have a theatrical release, I mean, that kind of thing is that's nonsense, and they can't behave that way. So I know how hard it is to make the right decision. So I would just say maybe they got to slow down and not be making public facing decisions that aren't wise.
Okay. Alan Wolk. Now, aside from, I don't think it was you that said that, but someone said their name ought to be Disco Duck. I'm not quite sure.
That's funny.
Alan Wolk, what would you do if you ran any or all of that?
Well, I think that the biggest plus that Disco Bros, Disco Duck has going for it is CNN, right? Because why do people continue to subscribe to pay TV? Because of news and sports. Now, sports is slowly making that migration over, but I think people feel kind of naked without having some access to CNN or MSNBC or Fox News if they're of that bent. But some sort of national news service, because what if there's an emergency and whatnot, and you can get your local news on apps now. And I think that is going to be a big thing to get people to actually start cutting the cord. And then they have this nice little bundle of Discovery, HBO Max, and CNN that they can start selling to people that meets a whole lot of needs. There's not a whole lot of overlap between Discovery and HBO. Discovery, well, I think I happen to agree with Zaslav that like it's often underrated by people because they have a lot of really popular shows. They've got a huge amount of genres, and most importantly, no one else does that. No one else has that kind of programming. And I always tell this story. My son is going to be 23 in October. When he was a baby and he would wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't fall back to sleep, I used to watch House Hunters, and it wasn't a new show 23 years ago. So they own all of that. That's all theirs. Like, and they've got so many series that are like that. I mean, the smartest thing that Zaz did was to buy Scripps, because they got all of that too, which sort of fits in.
Right
And
there.
then,
Yeah.
and then with HBO, I agree with everybody. They have to figure out what they're doing with that. They need to stop the nasties. First thing, they need to stop everybody sniping at Jason Kyler in the press, because that sort of turns everybody off, all of the sort of the production type people off from wanting to work with them. And they need to make it obvious to consumers what's going on. Because even with the ad supported thing, they're like, well, HBO content won't have ads on it. Well, what's an HBO show? Like, how do you decide which of your new stuff is an HBO show and which isn't? And it's a tricky thing for them to do, because they need to sort of convince all those 30 million, 40 million people who subscribe to HBO for The Sopranos and Silicon Valley that, we're still making this kind of stuff, even though everybody else like Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and Peacock is making the same thing too. But yet we're also giving the Colin Dixons of the world stuff that's a little bit more accessible, but still really good. And, so if you didn't like HBO before, well, check out Max, because there might actually be something you like here. So I think they need to sort of, with all these guys, they need to figure out what they want to be when they grow up with HBO Max, and sort of, and get that across to people. And so that people who subscribe to them on cable, when they decide to cut the cord, say, oh, I can't do without this, I need to get HBO Max.
Okay, Mike Bloxham. what would you
Yeah,
do if
well,
you were-
I actually think that the coming together of Discovery and Warner Media is actually a really smart thing. And I also love that basically nobody was saying, oh, that's going to happen, and then it happened. So that appeals to me anyway. But you've got one reason why it's a good thing, which is kind of secondary, is Warner Media is going to get run by people that know TV again and media, as opposed to AT&T. AT&T is a phenomenal company, and now it's going to benefit from getting back to the knitting, as it were. It's going to heavily invest in 5G, and that's going to be massive for everybody. But Warner Media is now back to being a pure play kind of media company, with everything that means these days. But looking at the brands, I mean, Alan, you just talked about Discovery and then now the Discovery Scripps combo. That is really the Netflix of unscripted in every single sense.
No.
It has the biggest, most successful portfolio of unscripted IP probably in the world. And that's the other point. Both Discovery as a portfolio and the HBO brand in particular are phenomenally strong international brands. And then add in Warner Brothers and the studio. I think they're kind of a sleeping giant in the way that the industry is looking at them right now, because there's going to get loads more growth in the US, but there's an inordinate amount of growth that they can pull out of international markets as well, and they're focused on that. And it's all in the execution. But if they get it right, I think that they're on a really, really strong trajectory to do incredibly well, because all of that IP that's there is complementary too. Because sure, Warner Media has some unscripted stuff in there, there's True TV and the networks and so on. But this suddenly pivots it, and they're kind of equally strong across both the scripted from Warner Brothers and from all the networks and HBO, and the unscripted from the what is now the combined Discovery Scripps are phenomenally strong. So I think it was a really good move for both. And I think you're going to see innovation there as well. I think to Colin's point, we're going to see more innovation on the ad format side of things, so that we're looking at different kinds of inventory which are tailored for the streaming environment, as opposed to just saying, oh, let's look at what we did on linear and slap 30-second spots on everything, which is still going to happen within streaming. But if that's all we do as an industry, that really is a colossal failure of imagination. And I don't think it is all we're going to do, because a lot of companies are working on that. And I'm sure we'll see some of that out of the new combined Discovery Warner, whatever it ends up being called, which I think is probably not what it is right now. And it's such a secondary issue, it almost doesn't matter. I think the other question is going to be, would I look to merge both services or keep them separate? And I think right now that would have to be an open question, because both of them, the paint's not dried really. They're still very young, they're still forming, and all the implications and opportunities of the merger have still yet to become clear. But when you look across those portfolios, I think you see both connection points and you see kind of chasms where they don't connect. That's natural, but I think I would prioritize really understanding how those two portfolios meet and don't meet with different audiences. And that should be what informs whether or not you put any of them together or whether you keep them all completely apart. So I think that would be one of my priorities.
You probably do both, right? You have, like keep only Discovery is X dollars, Discovery and Warner combo is more.
Maybe, but there's already a lot of kind of squirreliness on the part of consumers about managing all of these different services, and the cry for give me a simple way of getting access to all the stuff I've got is getting louder and louder, which kind of sounds a bit like going back to the old formats as we've all talked about in the past.
Well, it does. And I think Alan's point about the linear side of things is very well taken. I hadn't really been thinking about that, but I think you're absolutely right there that there is tremendous value in pay TV subscriptions. And this creates a little bit more of a must-have portfolio for both sides of that house. And so I think that's smart and adds a lot of consumer value.
Yeah. By the way, there's one other really important point, and I think Jason Kilar is going to get vindicated by history in not only the decision to do day and date release streaming and theatrical, but actually even the way he did it. Because although it put a lot of noses out of joints, and to Sherry's point, very powerful noses, there's no way they'd have actually finished the negotiations on whether or not and how to do that now if he'd actually set about doing it what would appear to be the right way. Let's all talk about it, guys. Those negotiations would have gone on forever. It was clearly a act first, ask forgiveness later. And they've renegotiated. They've paid out hundreds of millions on back end deals and all the rest of it to keep the talent happy. So I think it was always going to be messy, but I think this was more efficiently messy. And I think they've repaired relationships to a significant degree.
So they ripped the Band-Aid off and now they're healing.
I think so, yeah. And that's no small achievement, actually, on the part of the organization. And it's not just Jason Kilar, it's the whole team there lent into actually.
Yeah, I put down a lot of the growth that they've seen over the last six to 9 months to those movies.
To Wonder Woman right there, Wonder Woman, I believe the calculation was a couple million new subscribers, and all of a sudden, bango, they hit what would have been a traditional box office. Alan's smiling about that. We went through those.
And it's a totally different way of then evaluating sales off the back of a movie. It's not one ticket at the movies.
Right.
Or at least a percentage of those people that sign up to watch it, they'll stick with the service for a number of months.
Revenue per subscriber that came in. By the way, you know what? We have run through every bit of our initial 45 minutes, and we haven't hit anywhere close to our list. I will add one thing on the Disco Warner. If I ran that, I would take the next meeting with John Malone, because he changed his stock in Discovery when this was all done. And the next acquisition of Discovery doesn't have John Malone on the board. He did that on purpose. There was no accident on that. I think there's another shoe that will drop, and I think those two will go somewhere else before they actually close. But that's just my opinion of it.
Any thoughts on
who?
Yeah.
Comcast. Comcast has got the money. They've got the aggregation capability. That's my side. Viacom CBS is too small for anything, right? I'm sorry, guys, I own stock in them. They're too small. All right, you know what? We have some companies we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to ask each of you to comment, if you want to, on either Disney Plus, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Roku, or Comcast. And let's give just one short pithy comment on either Disney Plus, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Comcast, or Roku. And I'll go down to you, Colin. Which one do you want to pick? Because I think we're going to come back and do this again. But
I think so too. I'll take Peacock. I got 4 things they should do. Number 1, integrate all the Zumo channels that that Comcast owns. That'd be a great addition. They should go all in on all sports. They're already doing really well. They're shutting down NBC Sports Network at the end of this year. Really go in on sports. That's a big differentiator. They need to beef up their news. And again, they should just copy CBS, All Access, Paramount Plus, and what they're doing there. Get the locals in there. That'll be a big bonus. And the fourth thing is do a better job with the Winter Olympics games than they've done with the Summer Games. It's a mess in there. I couldn't find anything. And I was really upset that I upgraded my subscription because there wasn't anything additional to make it worth it.
All right, Alan, you actually had people complaining to you about the Peacock Sports, but
Yeah, I was gonna
of
say,
those four companies.
Yeah, they say, Colin, at least you upgraded, because a lot of people I know thought they had Peacock because they had signed up for free Peacock, which was a smart idea at first because they didn't have anything. There was no reason they had nothing to charge people for. But then they didn't tell anybody, because when people signed up for free Peacock, they didn't say, oh, and by the way,
Right.
there's a pay version of this if you want. So most people assumed it was just another fast. And then suddenly they get there to go and try and watch the Olympics. And then like, oh, wait, you have the wrong one. You need to pay for it. And like, what? This is a pay service? When did that happen? And if they had just done a better job, to your point about the Winter Olympics, if they just done a better job of telling people like, okay, this is the deal. And look what you get for it. Because it is a good deal. And if they had just sort of laid that out there instead of assuming people would like not care, then they would have been in a much better place and avoided a whole lot of bad publicity.
There you go. Michael, you want to make a final comment on any of the companies we haven't talked about yet?
Sure. I mean, I think Disney Plus, I guess, but it applies to Peacock as well. Building off what Alan said, lean into news, sort out news in the streaming space. There's huge potential. We know the power of news as a way of attracting eyeballs and getting habitual usage of a medium. Both of them have really strong news assets and legacies. And I know everybody's thinking about it, looking at it in major ways. But I think that's something one needs to accelerate and get ahead of it before it happens from elsewhere, in the same way we started to see Amazon jumping into sport and getting a chunk of the NFL. The other thing I would say to Disney is keep doing what you're doing, because the way they're leveraging what is probably the biggest, most comprehensive content library with Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, all the Disney stuff. I mean, just leverage the IP. I think Loki was a great example of taking a piece of IP and turning it into a different format with the series that probably wouldn't exist without Disney Plus, for example. Yeah. And when pandemic allows better, I say cross-organizational integration, parks, cruises, theatrical, everything. They've been kind of shackled on leveraging that for promoting it and creating experiences which link back to the streaming service. But I think that is an asset that they're sitting on, which would also benefit both ways, the streaming service and the parks business.
Cool, man. Sherry, final comment. Which of those companies do you want to politely, apparently, talk about?
Well, I want to echo the disappointment in how hard it was to find what I wanted to watch on the Olympics this year. I don't know if that was NBCU's fault or if it was my cable operator's fault or what, but it was a mess. My VOD didn't work. There were categories with no content in them and no indication of when content would be there. And it was just a big mess. And so I was very disappointed in that. And I would hope it is handled better. And the other thing I guess really this would apply to any platform that wants to include advertising in their monetization plan. I think we are missing the boat as an industry in the opportunity we have to use internet technology to deliver more interesting advertising in the form, in particular, an idea that I think could be really valuable and accepted by consumers, more importantly, is what I like to think of as sequential advertising. So since we know through the internet technology that we have, what people have been watching, we could be delivering long form story versions of advertisements chunked up into 15 to 30-second pieces so that we tell a whole story, we bring a consumer along through a brand so they don't get the ad fatigue that they now get from seeing the exact same ad too many times in a row. and they get to know a brand or a product better through the use of technology. I think we're missing the boat not doing that. And I hope that's what happens in the next year.
I love that image of a consumer looking at an ad and thinking, my God, what's going to happen next? Right?
And the
As
smart-
opposed
the
to,
s- the smart TV OEMs are particularly well positioned for that because they can see what you're watching on linear and on streaming.
Yep.
absolutely. All right, well, everybody, you know what? That was phenomenal. To our audience, this will also be available on demand. We have some questions we'll try to answer. I might try to go through the video of this after we're done and pick up some of the comments and try to put them into some social media. But thank you all very much.
Thank
Mike
you.
Bloxham, Alan Wolk, Sherry Brennan, Colin Dixon. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rick, for
Thank
putting
you,
this
guys.
together.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, to our host at WIP Media, we are done. Everybody out there, just be nice to each other.